Okay, so I'm Iain Davidson, I'm the Chief Pharmacist at the Royal Cornwall, very pleased to be here. And I'm going to present some data that we've put together at our hospital, but I think before I do that, I just want to put a bit of context around sort of the challenge that we have with medicines at the moment. So many of you will be aware of the Medications Without Harm global initiative by the WHO, triggered really by the recognition that poor medication practice, medication errors causes a huge amount of patient harm globally in the system. Up to $42 billion is wasted each year due to medication errors. The overall goal of the program, is to reduce severe harm to patients by medication errors by 50% by the year of 2022. So a very laudable aim and something that the NHS has absolutely signed up to. And this is the NHS's version. So we went away, or not we, but the NHS went away, the policy review unit, and trawled through a lot of the data around the evidence within England, and came out with the rather startling figure of 273 million errors, medication errors are happening within the NHS in England every year, of which of those about 66 million are a potential to cause moderate to severe harm, and that's both across primary and secondary care. About 20% of that happens at the prescribing stage, about 55% at the administration stage, and about 16% at the dispensing stage. So some big numbers there, and how does that manifest itself in our day-to-day lives? Well, about 6 to 7% of patients admitted to our hospitals are admitted because of adverse drug reactions. 2/3 of those are avoidable and are therefore classed as medication errors. It consumes 180,000 bed days in our hospitals. We kill 712 patients through medication errors, and we contribute to another 1,702 deaths because of medication errors. So there are some really big, important issues going on with how we use medicines in this country and globally that we need to tackle. As a Chief Pharmacist, I have the responsibility of safe medicines usage within our hospital. That's something that I'm paid to do. We prescribe tens of thousands of prescriptions every month in our hospital. We administer over 250,000 doses of medicines in our hospital, and we supply over 40,000 packs. And how am I and how are we as an organisation going to deliver on reducing harm to patients by 50%? And sort of picking up from some of the discussions this morning, that's not going to come by just improving our training. It's not going to come by making people concentrate a bit more or wearing red tabards when they're doing things. All that has places in there, but actually we need a fundamental change in how we do stuff if we're going to really achieve the goal that we're setting out to do. So a couple of big things that are happening in pharmacy at the moment that we're all really trying to achieve is around closed-loop working. So closed-loop administration is one side of it, so that's the whole barcoding your patient, and then when you administer the drug, so you scan the patient, scan the drug, you do the 5 rights at the patient bedside. The bit that my study looked at is the second closed loop, which is the closed loop supply side of stuff. So that is sort of the definition of that is that basically the supply process is driven entirely by the prescription or the administration of that drug. So doctor prescribes paracetamol 2 tablets 4 times a day for a patient, and then there's no rekeying in of any information then all the way through to the supply process. So pharmacist says it's safe, and then that's it, we get the supply. So a nice closed loop system, a lot less chances for human factor errors coming into that. And we don't have that at the moment. So in order to have that in the NHS, every trust would need electronic prescribing. We're probably at about 30% at the moment, though that number is increasing. But then also the electronic prescribing system, again, talking from yesterday around interoperability, the prescribing systems don't routinely talk to our pharmacy stock control systems, which is where we issue our medicines from. So what usually happens, and certainly what happens in our trust, is you'll get a nice printout from the electronic prescribing system of the medicines that you want, that they want you to supply, and then you have to re-enter all that data into your stock control system to then get the product. And that data entry is absolutely key, and that's where we have brought in barcoding there for the key data attributes around patient name, around the product, the drug, and around the place and location. And it's crucial we get that right, because that data entry drives the rest of the dispensing process. So I've got a bloody great big robot, as most hospitals do, that does the majority of my dispensing for me. If I ask it for the right drug, it will get the right drug. If I ask it for the wrong drug, it will get the wrong drug. It's very good at doing what it's told. Similarly, that process also drives the label that we stick on the product around, what the product is, how many times you take it, which patients it's for. So some really key things there around patient safety that we need to do. So that was what our study looked at, and these were our results. So we saw a statistically significant reduction in prevented dispensing errors, so a 76% reduction in errors. And what was kind of particularly important there was anything that was barcode sensitive, so anything around the patient, the product, or the place, we had no errors at all. So we totally eradicated the errors by using barcode data entry rather than manual entry on that. So the one area that we're still getting errors is around the label direction. So taking 1 tablet a day instead of 2 tablets a day, again, can cause clinical significance, and we need the standards there. And I know Ansley and co are working very hard around dose syntaxes and getting some standards around dosing. What we also saw was actually it was a faster process, so 7% faster, again, statistically significant, and when you're dispensing over 40,000 items a month, actually that's a pretty big slug of time. But it was also a lot easier to train staff, so staff that were there for two months were just as good at dispensing as staff that were there for a couple of years. So the whole better care costs less sort of hashtag very much applied to this process as well. And then we did a bit around the qualitative side of stuff, so around what our staff felt about using barcode scanning. And it was good to see 97% of our staff agreed that actually that process really does help to reduce medication errors. Slightly more perturbing element of it was actually only 2/3 of them actually wanted to use the system. So even though they were aware that this new process helped reduce errors, in fact eradicated many errors, I had 1/3 of my team, they were a lovely team, but for some reason 1/3 of them didn't actually want to use the system. So we dug into that a little bit more in some of the staff forums that we did as part of this formal study. And some of that was just the whole resistance to change. They've been doing this for years. Concerns about being de-skilled, concerns about actually, I am the fastest labourer in Cornwall, and that's very important. And that's when it's really busy, I get put on the labelling machine. So there's something around that and losing their sort of identity a little bit there. Something around the design of the system. So we use JAC as our pharmacy stock control system, and we've just bolted on barcoding onto the end of that. It's not designed around that. And when you think around the sort of supermarket terminals, when you go and pay for your own stuff, that is very specifically designed, both in the programming and also how that workstation is set up, so that you can easily put your shopping through that. It's all touchscreen and everything, whereas we hadn't done that. We hadn't reviewed our workstations. We hadn't reviewed the software particularly. So there's a lot of picking up a barcode scanner for one bit and then having to rekey for the next bit. So there's a clear need to really think about how we design both the IT and the workstations and redesign that stuff if we're going to be using barcoding. And then I think the last thing is probably, again, talking a bit about this morning, is that leadership role of actually making sure that my staff understand that we are part of the 237 million medication errors that are happening naturally that are causing patient harm. And actually we have a role and a responsibility, even at the very basic stages of dispensing, to actually be using the safest processes that we can. So those were the headlines from our studies. And just last slide really, so sort of where to go in the future with this. So maybe slightly contrary to Nick's position, with the Falsified Medicines Directive coming along, from a closed loop supply perspective, actually a lot of the products either now or very soon will have the key data attributes on the drug packs that we need around the GTINs, expiry dates, lot numbers and serialization number. So from that perspective, we are kind of where we need to be. The big thing for us where we really need to shift, if we are going to stand any chance of delivering this 50% reduction in harm to our patients, the big shift needs to happen around the standards and the interoperability between the electronic prescribing and the pharmacy stock control systems. We need that decision support. We talk a lot about decision support at the prescribing level, but actually we need that decision support at the final checking stage as well. So that single scan at the end not only can tell you whether or not you've got a counterfeit drug in your hand, but could also tell me as a final checking pharmacist whether I've put the right label onto the right product for the right patient, and hey presto, that's great. Or it might also tell me that actually there's been a product recall here, or that the doctor's come along and they've changed the dose of this medicine and actually you need to put it back around the loop and supply it. So we need that sort of, that level of reliability at that final stage. I think our study has shown that it's absolutely achievable. And we all agree that we need to be reducing harm to our patients. We all agree with that WHO goal. So we just need to get on and start to deliver this now. And that's me. Thank you very much.
You spoke about 60% of staff wanting to use barcode-enabled systems.
Yep.
What do you think it would take to increase that number?
So I think probably if we did it again now, I think some of it was that just initial sort of change management type of curve that you get around the adoption. So I think we might get a different answer now. I think there's something about having it as a ubiquitous thing across the department as well. So this was around a particular type of dispensing that we're doing with named patient stuff, but actually that process was slightly different for discharge medicine. So having the same processes across the whole system, I think would really help people adopt, because they're just using one process. And as I say, I think the leadership thing is really important, making people understand that we have a really important role here to do stuff.
There's no more questions. I'd like to thank you.
There's one in the middle.
Oh, we do have a question.
Seeing the success that it's happened with your recent study,
Yeah.
how has there been any interest in the other departments of Royal Cornwall to actually start putting it in there as well, such as the theatre, operating theatres?
So we certainly, there is, and the scan, because we were one of the Scan for Safety demonstrator sites, we have got those kind of things happening across there as well. But it is very interesting so we're doing scanning with electronic observations now, obviously with blood tracking and things like that. So it's beginning to permeate. I've just been sort of doing a little bit of work as a clinical director across the clinical support services, and it's very interesting going into the labs and the reagents and all that kind of stuff. And actually there's a whole load of other opportunity out there when you do look across some of those other services. So it is ripe, it's just getting it out there, as you say.
Excellent.
Thank you for your time.
That's all right. Pleasure. Thank you.